Good morning, beautiful Hannah. Uh, this morning we're going to be reading a chapter book. It's called My Side of the Mountain, and it's a Newbery Honor Book Award. Newbery Award. Written by Jean Craighead George. And on the back it says, in bold type with quotes, an extraordinary book. It will be read year after year. And that's attributed to the Horn book. Sam Gridley is terribly unhappy in his family's crowded New York City apartment. So armed with just the bare necessities, a penknife, a ball of cord, some flint and steel, and the clothes on his back, he runs away to the mountains. There Sam must rely on his own ingenuity and the resources of the great outdoors to survive, and he discovers a side of himself he never knew existed. Inside the facing page, there is a map of his mountain, and you probably are not going to be able to see all the detail, but basically the author's preface. When I was in elementary school, I packed my suitcase and told my mother I was going to run away from home. As I envisioned it, I would live by a waterfall in the woods and catch fish on hooks made from the forks of tree limbs, as I had been taught by my father. I would walk among the wild flowers and trees, listen to the birds, read the weather report in the clouds and the wind, and stride down mountain sides independent and free. Wisely, my mother did not try to dissuade me. She had been through this herself. She checked my bag to see if I had my toothbrush and a postcard to let her know how I was getting along, and kissed me goodbye, and 40 minutes later I was home. When my daughter, Twig, was in elementary school, she told me she was going to run away to the woods. I checked her backpack for her toothbrush and watched her go down the front steps, her shoulders squared confidently. I blew her a kiss and sat down to wait. Presently she was back. Although wishing to run to the woods and live on our own seems to be an inherited characteristic in our family, we are not unique. Almost everyone I know has dreamed at some time of running away to a distant mountain or island, castle or sailing ship, to live there in beauty and peace. Few of us make it, however. It is one thing to wish to go and another matter to do it. I might have been able to do what Sam Gridley does in this book, live off the land, make a home, survive by wits and library research, for I had the knowledge. My father, who was a naturalist and scientist, taught me the plants and animals of the eastern forests and showed me where the wild edible fruits and tubers grew. On weekends along the Potomac River near Washington, D.C., where I was born and grew up, he and I boiled water in leaves and made rabbit traps. Together we made tables and chairs out of saplings bound with the braided inner bark of the basswood tree. My brothers, two of the first falconers in the United States, helped me in the training of a falcon. I had the know-how for surviving in the woods, and yet I came home. But not Sam, I said to myself when I sat down at my typewriter and began putting on paper this story, one that I had been writing in my head for many, many years. The writing came easily. Sam needed a home. I remembered a huge tree my brothers had camped in on an island in the Potomac River. A tree would be Sam's home, and I knew how he would survive when foraging became tough. A falcon will be his provider, I said to myself. With ideas coming fast, the first draft was done in 2 weeks. 5 revisions later, it was finished and off to the publisher. Back came a phone call from Sharon Bannigan, the editor of E.P. Dutton's Children's Book Department at the time. Elliot McRae, the publisher, she said, won't print this book. He says parents should not encourage their kids to leave home. Discouraged, I hung up the phone and walked out into the woods beyond the house. As always, when I am in the wildwood, I very quickly forget what was troubling me. A sentinel crow was protecting its flock by watching the sky for hawks. A squirrel was building a nest of leaves for the winter. A spider was tapping out a message to his mate on a line of her web. Better to run to the woods than the city, I thought. Here there is the world to occupy the mind. The telephone rang. Sharon Bannigan was back on the wire, and she was almost singing. Elliot McRae had changed his mind. And what, I asked, had worked this miracle? I simply told him it was better to have children run to the woods than the city, she said. He thought about that. Since he has a home in the wilds of the Adirondack Mountains and goes off there alone himself, he suddenly understood your book. My Side of the Mountain will be published in the spring of '59. From that date to this, I have been answering children's letters about Sam. Most want to know if he's a real person. Some, convinced that he is, have biked to Delhi, New York, from as far away as Long Island, New York, to find his tree, his falcon, weasel, and raccoon. To these and all others who ask, I say, there is no real Sam except inside me. His adventures are the fulfillment of that day long ago when I told my mother I was going to run away, got as far as the edge of the woods, and came back. Perhaps Sam will fulfill your dreams too. Be you writer or reader, it is very pleasant to run away in a book. And so, My Side of the Mountain, in which I hole up in a snowstorm. I am on my mountain in a tree home that people have passed without ever knowing I am here. The house is a hemlock tree 6 feet in diameter and must be as old as the mountain itself. I came upon it last summer and dug and burned it out until I made a snug cave in the tree that I now call home. My bed is on the right as you enter and is made of ash slats and covered with deer hide. On the left is a small fireplace about knee-high. It is of clay and stones. It has a chimney that leads the smoke out through a knothole. I chipped out 3 other knotholes to let fresh air in. The air coming in is bitter cold. It must be below 0 outside. Yet I can sit here inside my tree and write with bare hands. The fire is small too. It doesn't take much fire to warm this tree room. It is the 4th of December, I think. It may be the 5th. I'm not sure because I have not recently counted the notches in the aspen pole that is my calendar. I have been just too busy gathering nuts and berries, smoking venison, fish, and small game to keep up with the exact date. The lamp I'm writing by is deer fat poured into a turtle shell with a strip of my old city trousers for a wick. It snowed all day yesterday and today. I have not been outside since the storm began, and I am bored for the first time since I ran away from home 8 months ago to live on the land. I am well and healthy. The food is good. Sometimes I eat turtle soup, and I know how to make acorn pancakes. I keep my supplies in the wall of the tree in wooden pockets that I have chopped myself. Every time I have looked at those pockets during during the last few days, I have felt just like a squirrel, which reminds me, I didn't see a squirrel one whole day before that storm began. I guess they are holed up and eating their stored nuts too. I wonder if the Baron, that's the wild weasel who lives in the big boulder to the north of my tree, is also denned up. Well, anyway, I think the storm is dying down because the tree is not crying so much. When the wind really blows, the whole tree moans right down to the roots, which is where I am. Tomorrow I hope the Baron and I can tunnel out into the sunlight. I wonder if I should dig the snow. But that would mean I would have to put it somewhere, and the only place to put it is in my snug tree. Maybe I can pack it with my hands as I go. I've always dug into the snow from the top, never up from the bottom. The Baron must dig up from under the snow. I wonder where he puts what he digs. Well, I guess I'll know in the morning. When I write that last when I wrote that last winter, I was scared and thought maybe I'd never get out of my tree. I had been scared for 2 days, ever since the first blizzard, so sorry, hit the Catskill Mountains. When I came up to the sunlight, which I did by simply poking my head into the soft snow and standing up, I laughed at my dark fears. Everything was white, clean, and shining and beautiful. The sky was blue, blue, blue. The hemlock tree was laced with snow, the meadow was smooth and white, and the gorge was sparkling with ice. It was so beautiful and peaceful that I laughed out loud. I guess I laughed because my first snowstorm was over and it had not been so terrible after all. Then I shouted, "I did it!" My voice never got very far. It was hushed by the tons of snow. I looked for signs of the Baron Weasel. His footsteps were all over the boulder, also slides where he had played. He must have been up for hours enjoying the new snow. Inspired by his fun, I poked my head into my tree and whistled. Sorry, it's getting late, and after this chapter, I'm going to put my head on the pillow. But for now, inspired by his fun, I poked my head into the tree and whistled. Frightful, my trained falcon flew to my fist, and we jumped and slid down the mountain, making big holes and trenches as we went. It was good to be whistling and carefree again because I was sure scared by the coming of that storm. And here's a picture of the boy and his falcon outside of the tree. I had been working since May, learning how to make a fire with flint and steel, finding what plants I could eat, how to trap the animals and catch fish. All this so that when the curtain of blizzard struck the Catskills, I could crawl inside my tree and be comfortably warm and have plenty to eat. During the summer and fall, I had thought about the coming winter. However, on that third day of December, when the sky blackened, the temperatures dropped, and the first flakes swirled around me, I must admit that I wanted to run back to New York. Even the first night that I spent out in the woods when I couldn't get the fire started was not as frightening as the snowstorm that gathered behind the gorge and mushroomed up over my mountain. I was smoking 3 trout. It was 9 o'clock in the morning. I was busy keeping the flames low so they would not leap up and burn the fish. As I worked, it occurred to me that it was awfully dark for that hour of the morning. Frightful was leashed to her tree, to her tree stub. She seemed restless and pulled at her tethers. Then I realized that the forest was dead quiet. Even the woodpeckers that had been tapping around me all morning were silent. The squirrels were nowhere to be seen. The juncos and chickadees and nuthatches were all gone. I looked to see what the Baron Weasel was doing. He was not around. I looked up. From my tree you can see the gorge beyond the meadow. Whitewater pours between the black, wet boulders and cascades into the valley below. The water that day was as dark as the rocks. Only the sound told me that it was still falling. Above the darkness stood another darkness, the clouds of winter, black and fearsome. They looked as wild as the winds that were bringing them, and I grew sick with fright. I knew I had enough food. I knew everything was going to be perfectly all right, but knowing that didn't help. I was scared. I stamped out at the fire and pocketed the fish. I tried to whistle for Frightful, but couldn't purse my shaking lips, tight enough to get out anything but a pfft. So I grabbed her by her side straps that are attached to her legs, and we dove through the deerskin door into my room in the tree. I put Frightful on the bedpost and curled up in a ball on the bed. I thought about New York and the noise and lights and how a snowstorm always seemed very friendly there. I thought about our apartment too. At that moment it seemed bright and lighted and warm. It was hard to keep saying to myself, there are 11 of us in it. Dad, mother, 4 sisters, 4 brothers, and me. And not one of us liked it except perhaps little Nina, who was too young to know. Dad didn't like it even a little bit. He had been a sailor once, but when I was born he gave up the sea and worked on the docks in New York. Dad didn't like the land, he liked the sea, wet and big and endless. Sometimes he would tell me about great-grandfather Gribley, who owned the land in the Catskill Mountains and felled trees and built a home and plowed the land only to discover that he wanted to be a sailor. The farm faded and great-grandfather Gribley went to sea. As I lay with my face buried in the sweet, greasy smell of my deerskin, I could hear my dad's voice saying, that land is still in the family's name. Somewhere in the Catskills is an old beech tree with the name Gribley carved on it. It marks the northern boundary of Gribley's Folly. The land is no place for a Gribley. The land is no place for a Gribley, I said. The land is no place for a Gribley, and here I am, 300 feet from the beach, with Gribley carved on it. I fell asleep at that point, and when I awoke, I was hungry. I cracked some walnuts, got down the acorn flour I had pounded with a bit of ash to remove the bite. Reached out the door for a little snow and stirred up some acorn pancakes. I couldn't. I cooked them. I cooked them on a I cooked them on a top of a tin can, and as I ate them, smothered with blueberry jam, I knew that the land was just the place for a Gribley. That's where we'll stop for tonight. Tomorrow's reading will be called I Get Started on This Venture. So I hope you enjoyed that, and if you did, we're going to continue on reading the book, and looks like a fun one. It's a young adult book, but it's pleasant and fun to read. So, good night. I hope you feel much better when you watch this. Love you.